It's important when we talk about the Office of Strategic Capital that we put it in the context of why we exist. The office is really, if we can go to the next slide, sits within a larger strategy, a larger department strategy and interagency strategy to help the United States compete, to help the United States compete in today's global competition over critical technology areas. Now, the Under Secretary for Research and Engineering, the Under Secretary 𝐼𝐼𝐜𝐞, within the DoD is responsible for the department for defining what those critical technologies are. We have 14 that are on this slide. And we define critical technologies as enabling and frontier technologies that are vital to national security. If we go to the next slide, winning this competition for the United States is vital to national security and also economic prosperity. And it's important at OSC that we talk about this competition not just as a technology competition, which is normally how the department engages around the development of technologies. We think about science and technology, and the DoD for a long time, really since the end of World War II, has been responsible for the development of new and emerging technologies. But the competition today is not just about the technologies. It's about the fundamental economics, the investment that it takes to scale these technologies from prototypes into products, into mass production. Today's competition is not just a technology competition, it's a techno-economic competition. And so winning this competition isn't just about technological progress. It's not just about national security, it's about long-term economic prosperity. If the supply chain disruptions during COVID taught us anything, is that technology sectors such as semiconductors are not only vital to DoD capabilities, but they're also vital to our everyday lives. And that is an impact that we feel as consumers as well as a department. We can go to the next slide. One of the reasons this is a techno-economic competition is because technology today is not just financed by the government, it's financed by the private sector. And typically, how we think about this in terms of the government is the DoD, along with many of our partners across the interagency, invest hundreds of billions of dollars annually into research and development. Last year, I believe there's $184 billion spent across all federal agencies. The DoD was the bulk of that spending to invest in advancing basic science, think white papers, laboratory research, into applied prototypes. After that prototypes are done, we depend on our private capital markets. We depend on industry to commercialize the prototypes that are going to best support consumer applications, best support their potential market adoptions, best support demand. And we used this strategy. We've relied really on this strategy ever since the end of the 1970s. And it's led to these incredibly prosperous private capital markets. I mean, when you look at investment today, investment into new companies, into developing new products, private capital, U.S. private capital, is the world leader in investment. Our U.S. private capital markets, both at the equity stage, for early stage product development, for early stage business model development, is nearly half of all global spending, but so is U.S. investment in later stage debt financing. Think about scaling manufacturing and infrastructure, right? Real growth capital to build hard things. The U.S. still comprises nearly half of all available private capital. Today, the private capital markets have never been better, never been more liquid, and the United States is in an incredible position to take advantage of these private capital markets when it comes to our current global competition. The issue is, if we can go to the next slide, is that we've seen a market trend in private capital markets away from investing in what we consider deep technology areas, or critical technology areas, and into less critical technology areas that support higher margin businesses with lower technical risk. Right? For example, VC investment from 2006 to 2017 had a massive reduction from 45% of its investments going into hardware. If you looked at our critical technology areas, many of those are hardware-based technology areas, into software. Why? Well, investors are doing really smart things, right? These are incredibly talented, smart individuals that are investing in what they believe are the highest return, lowest risk technology areas, right? And we've seen the private capital markets grow incredibly strongly because of those investment opportunities. If we go to the next slide, this impact is felt across all of our critical technology areas. And to kind of draw some more details around where we see private investment going today, private investment in a technology area such as e-commerce was about 2x more than it was in artificial intelligence, about 3 times more than it was in biotech, and nearly 150 times more than it was in quantum. So if we look at our critical technology areas and we assess that private capital will be a critical competitive advantage for the United States in order to advance technologies to help the United States win this global competition, then we need to find better ways to partner with private capital providers to increase capital flows to those areas that are otherwise less opportunistic than the technology areas we see private capital flowing towards today. If we go to the next slide, this is something that the Department of Defense in and of itself isn't the only organization that have been thinking about this. This is really an all of national security approach. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, last year said, "We are investing in industries of the future and strengthening the resilience and security of the supply chains that underpin them. With each of these investments, our goal is to crowd in private capital, not replace it, and to attract patient capital to bring critical technologies to scale." This concept of patient capital, these long duration investments in high capital intensive industries, hardware, deep tech is expensive. It's much more expensive than software. So how do we combine strategic public investments to crowd in private capital to make it more to increase the opportunities for private capital to invest in the things that it otherwise wouldn't invest in? Aligned to this national security strategy, go to the next slide, the Secretary of Defense established OSC last year with really 2 primary objectives: to attract private capital into critical technologies and scale private investment according to national security priorities. Now, as the National Security Advisor talked about this, the head of the National Economic Council talked about this. This is an all-of-government approach. But we are a DoD organization, and at the end of the day, we need to think about ways that we can create strategies that crowd in patient capital, crowd in private capital to support these critical technology areas, but do it in a way where we're also directly supporting DoD objectives. The way that we think about this is to think deeply about, well, what is the critical technology landscape in which we can crowd in capital to help accelerate those companies, accelerate our mission partners to meeting DoD objectives. If we go to the next slide, in order to help us think through how we can use strategies to support DoD operations, we've developed what we call an emerging technology framework. The competitive landscape for these critical technologies is commonly thought through as a landscape of transition. Right? When we think about this concept of transition, normally we think about advancing it from early stage, laboratory processes, right, bench research, white papers, into what we like to call in the department full rate production. The issue with that is, one, we all know technology development is not actually a linear process.
Yes.
But we also know that all of the technologies we care about don't directly transition to the things that we buy. And so it's important for us to think about the framework in which we can crowd in private capital in very different ways. In a way that allows us to contemplate how these technologies that we're advancing eventually end up in support of DoD operations and into DoD capabilities. And so our framework, we're looking not only at the maturation of the technologies and the maturation of the manufacturing levels, but also looking at the supplier position. When you think about our critical technology areas, the vast majority of those technology areas are actually making investments into things that we do not buy, right? Now, it's absolutely critical for the Department of Defense to continue to invest in semiconductors and carbon nanotubes and biotech. But those investments are value chain investments. They're investments into component parts that are critical to future DoD capabilities, but as we talked about earlier, they're also critical to our everyday lives. The difference is that if the investments are going into the things that we buy, the department has this whole other tool to attract and scale private capital, which is our procurement system. If they go into the things that we don't buy, then we don't have that tool to attract and scale private capital. And so the strategies that we're developing inside of the OSC are thinking deeply about the investments that the department is making and how we actually generate technological growth so that that technological growth begets business models that support both integration into DoD capabilities, which we would consider transition to the DoD, and also growth commercially. So if we can go to the next slide, we're excited today for the first time to talk about some of these programs. The first program that we launched is the Small Business Investment Company Critical Technologies Initiative. This program is live. The Secretary and the Administrator signed a letter of intent in December, of which the Associate Administrator Bailey DeVries, who oversees the SBIC program at the SBA, and I signed an MOA last Friday to officially ink the deal between the DoD and the SBA on this important initiative. The SBIC program is a very different type of DoD program. Through this program, we provide loan guarantees to investors to raise debt to match with private capital, where that total investment fund, the government-backed debt, and the private capital invests in critical technology companies. Right? The approach that we're taking with the SBIC program is one where we're trying to increase the investment to crowd in private capital, to create patient capital investment funds where they're investing in the deep technology areas, prioritizing those areas that are investing into things that have large application, like semiconductors, but aren't necessarily going directly to the things that we buy, which we commonly may refer to as things like defense tech, right, or DoD capabilities. This program is an incredibly interesting program for us because it provides a new financial tool to the department that we have not had access to for the last 40 plus years. But I want to highlight that the SBIC program was born out of a Sputnik moment, out of the Sputnik moment. 1957, the Eisenhower administration wakes up to the fact that the Soviet Union has capabilities that surpass ours. They have a number of systemic changes that are launched in 1958. One of those is the SBIC program that helps to birth the entire venture capital asset class. SBIC has led to investments in Intel and Apple and Sun Microsystems. My favorite example is Cray Research, the world's first supercomputer company, helped us compete. It helped the Department of Energy compete during the Cold War. It as a company, required investment from patient capital sources. It struggled to raise money on the private markets. Unfortunately for Cray, there were 3 SBICs that invested into Cray to build the world's first supercomputer. Within 10 years, it was an international company, having paid tens of millions of dollars back to the taxpayer through corporate taxes. And the vital part of this kind of approach is that these programs are inherently efficient. Loan guarantee programs do not cost the taxpayer money. Unlike other programs inside of the Department of Defense, which we spend our funding, and we need to spend money. We need to spend money on R&D. We need to spend money on buying the things we need. These programs are investment programs. They use this concept of leverage to lower the cost of capital, to increase private capital investment into these areas that they otherwise wouldn't invest in. The other leverage program that we're looking to launch potentially this year is a loan program initiative. The Department of Energy's Loan Program Office has for a long time increased investment into energy, right? It helped to birth the entire electric vehicle industry. It's these types of programs that we see as great opportunities for the department and for the taxpayer that can support our other critical technology areas. It's great for the Department of Energy that they have a loan program office, but we don't have a Department of Semiconductors. We don't have a Department of Advanced Materials. We don't have a Department of Biotech. For many of our critical technology areas, the Department of Defense is leading not only the early stage science and technology, but by de facto, it needs to think deeply about the infrastructure, manufacturing, and production lines that it requires for an entire ecosystem to support not only department priorities, but also get this science and technology investment that the taxpayer has done into the hands of our consumers, into being commercialized. If we go to the next slide, the leverage programs like the SBIC program, like the Loan Program Initiative, aren't the only programs that we're launching this year. The other programs that we're launching are really taking a slightly different strategy, which is syndication. And these programs are also focused on our critical technology areas, but when we have opportunities to transition technology to the department, in those subset of critical technology areas where we are actually buying things, we can use different types of strategies where we can partner directly, we can do cost sharing with our private capital providers to co-fund technology development efforts where we see a buyer at the end of the development. Programs like the Transition Acceleration Program are built on some of the work that we've done in the Air Force over the last few years. Programs like the Strategic Fund Increase Program, where we partnered Air Force SBIR funding with private capital funding to co-fund technology development, where we see opportunities to transition to a requirement owner into a program office. These are the types of programs we're looking to apply across the DoD. We're thinking deeply about what are the opportunities that we see in the out-year procurement budgets, which was just released by the president last week. And it's exciting to us to find opportunities where we see a technology being developed into a capability where we think we can partner with private capital, that we can do this together. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to first principles for us, which is partnering with private capital providers so that we can attract and scale private capital and support national security.